Today, salt is almost invisible. It sits beside the pepper, costs almost nothing, and disappears into food without a second thought. But for thousands of years, this ordinary crystal could preserve a winter's food, finance a government, support a city, or turn an unpopular law into national rebellion. Empires did not rise because of salt alone. Governments did not collapse because of one tax. But control salt, and a ruler controlled something nearly everyone needed. Abuse that control, and the same mineral could become a symbol of everything people hated about the state. The first reason was brutally practical. Human bodies need sodium, and communities far from natural deposits still had to obtain it. Salt also solved one of history's most persistent problems: time. Before refrigeration, fresh meat spoiled quickly, fish rotted, and seasonal abundance vanished long before winter ended. Salting removed moisture and slowed decay. This changed the value of geography. A coastline with evaporation ponds, a desert hiding ancient seabeds, or a deep brine well could become an economic asset. The roads connecting those sources to hungry populations could become even more valuable. And because demand was broad and predictable, governments noticed. China provides one of the clearest examples. Chinese producers obtained salt from seawater, inland lakes, springs, and deep wells. In Sichuan, workers developed sophisticated drilling and boiling systems to pull brine from beneath the ground. Different dynasties controlled the industry differently. But by the Han period, around the 2nd century BCE, the central government was using monopolies over salt and iron to strengthen state finances. The logic was simple. Harvest taxes rose and fell. Salt consumption was comparatively steady. Taxing it worked like collecting a small payment from nearly every household. Officials licensed merchants, regulated production, and measured shipments. Wherever legal salt became too expensive, smuggling became attractive. Ancient Rome understood the strategic value of movement. The Via Salaria, the Salt Road, linked Rome with salt-producing areas near the coast. Salt moved inland beside food, livestock, soldiers, and trade. This is where a famous story usually appears. Roman soldiers were supposedly paid in bags of salt, giving us the word salary. It is memorable. The evidence is weak. The Latin word salarium is related to salt, but the exact connection remains uncertain. Roman soldiers were paid in money. There is no solid basis for scenes of legionaries receiving salt instead of coins. Across the Sahara, geography produced a different salt economy. Miners cut heavy slabs from ancient deposits. Caravans loaded them onto camels and carried them hundreds of kilometers through an environment where a missed well could become fatal. South of the desert, salt was scarcer and more valuable. Medieval writers described extraordinary exchange rates and salt cut into smaller pieces for transactions. The trade connected North Africa with Timbuktu, Jenny, and the wider economies of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. Gold traveled north, salt traveled south. Salt did not create West Africa's empires by itself. Their power also depended on agriculture, security, political organization, and many forms of commerce. But salt helped make the trans-Saharan system profitable enough to support wealthy cities and long-distance exchange. In medieval Europe, Venice turned salt into maritime policy. The Venetian Republic controlled supply, weakened competing salt works, and channeled trade through its own institutions. From the 13th century, returning merchants could be required to carry salt. The state managed its sale, while dependable salt cargo helped reduce the cost of transporting more valuable goods. Ordinary salt helped support ships carrying luxury merchandise. Salt gave Venice a commodity rural populations continually needed, and the government could systematically control. The same logic became dangerous when control felt arbitrary. In France, salt was governed by the gabelle, taxes, and monopoly rules that became notorious under the monarchy. The system was deeply unequal. Different provinces faced different prices, duties, and exemptions. Salt that was affordable on one side of a boundary could become contraband on the other. Smugglers moved it through forests and hidden compartments. Officials searched homes and seized illegal supplies. The government saw lost revenue. Ordinary people saw a state criminalizing access to a necessity. The gabelle triggered repeated resistance and became part of the wider anger directed at the old regime. It did not cause the French Revolution alone. Debt, failed harvests, food prices, political exclusion, and deep inequality mattered enormously. But salt made unequal government tangible. People could taste the monarchy's rules at every meal. The revolutionary government abolished the gabelle in 1790. Napoleon later restored a salt tax, and versions of it survived far longer than the monarchy that made it infamous. More than a century later, salt became political again under British rule in India. Colonial law controlled production and taxation. Indians living beside the sea could be punished for freely collecting or making a substance found on their own coastline. Mahatma Gandhi understood the power of that contradiction. In 1930, he and a small group began walking toward the coastal village of Dandi. The march lasted weeks. As it crossed towns and villages, more people joined and the story spread. At the shore, Gandhi broke the law by taking natural salt. No palace fell that morning, and British rule did not end that year. But the gesture transformed an abstract argument about imperial authority into something anyone could understand. The government claimed the right to control a necessity produced by sea and sun. Gandhi answered by bending down and picking it up. The Salt March helped launch a wider campaign of civil disobedience. Across India, people made salt, sold illegal salt, protested, and accepted arrest. The mineral became a physical symbol of the claim that colonial power had entered too deeply into ordinary life. That is the pattern running through salt's history. Its political power came from being ordinary, necessary, and unevenly distributed. States profited because demand rarely disappeared. Traders became wealthy, moving it between abundance and scarcity. Communities survived winters and longer journeys because of it. But necessity also imposed a limit. When governments pushed control too far, salt taxes stopped looking like clever finance and began to look like proof of predatory power. Modern mining, global transport, refrigeration, and industrial production have made salt cheap and easy to ignore in much of the world. Its old political machinery has mostly disappeared from view. Its history leaves a broader lesson. Governments are strongest when they organize access to necessities fairly. They become vulnerable when everyday survival begins to feel like a privilege granted by rulers. Salt built no empire alone and overthrew no government by itself. But for thousands of years, it showed exactly where power lived and what could happen when ordinary people decided that power had gone too far.